Here we go.
Let me smash.
If you were to ask me what I think the greatest game of all time is, I would say without a hint of irony or hyperbole, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Am I particularly good at it? Well, no, but I still love it. Regardless, no game has ever come close to achieving what it has set out to do, and before I go any further, I'm going to stop you right there. No, Fortnite doesn't count. Yes, Fortnite is still a good game whose accomplishments shouldn't be understated, but there's this sort of capitalistic cynicism there compared to Smash Ultimate's genuine earnesty that it proudly wears on its sleeve. The thing is, Smash Ultimate exists in the context of what came before it, as the celebration of the intricate mosaic of the blocks it's built from. It's absolutely more than the sum of its parts, but I want to know more about those parts. One day at work some time ago, when I was disassociating while eating some chicken tenders on my lunch break, for the first time that day, a thought appeared in my head. What if I went out to understand the full context of the game that I love so much? What if I set out to fully understand where each of these fighters came from? From Super Mario to Sora Kingdom Hearts itself, what is every single fighter's most iconic game? And how long would it take me, or you dear viewer, to beat them all? Couple small disclaimers before we get started. When looking at this gargantuan roster, there are a couple of idiosyncrasies and quirks I want to take a look at. First, we're going to be focusing on specifically a character's Smash iteration, or at the very least, which game was the biggest source of inspiration for their respective movesets, and what their game of origin is. For example, Link has been in Smash from the very beginning, however, Ultimate uses specifically his Breath of the Wild version, so for the purposes of this video, Breath of the Wild will be the game representing Link. Second, this whole video is going to be based on my personal opinions and perspective on each of these characters' legacies, so we'll most definitely have some different opinions regarding some of my choices, and if you think I'm a brick dumb idiot for picking Fire Emblem Awakening as the best representation for Chrom, instead of Tokyo Mirage Essence Sharp FE/Encore, then let me know in the comments. You'd be wrong for thinking so, but I'll let you cook regardless. I do genuinely want to hear what you all think. Okay, so how's this going to work, you may ask? Well, we're going to basically go down the roster from Mario to Sora, figure out what their respective most iconic game is, and then pop on over to howlongtobeat.com and look at the average runtime of what each game is, and then at the end of the video, take the time and add it all up so we get one big scary number for all of those who are either brave or foolish enough like me, Tushivi Valderrami, to go on such an arduous quest. That being said, I'm not going to be lingering on each fighter for too long, considering that there's 89 of these little guys. However, some of them share a game, so when that happens, I will be lumping them together. Okay, let's get Sakurai's wild ride on the road. Starting with our first passenger, Mr. Video Games himself, Super Mario. So yes, admittedly Super Mario Bros. For the NES may be his most famous entry, however, it's apparent that Super Mario 64 served as the basis for his moveset, and is emblematic of the quote-unquote modern Mario. And it's honestly just as iconic, so we're going to go with that one. As for how long it takes to beat, it looks like it takes about 12 hours, so not too bad. Next up is Donkey Kong, and this is also going to be the first time where I feel like multiple characters are lumped together. I don't think it'd be controversial to say that Donkey Kong Country is his most iconic entry, but Diddy Kong and K. Rool's as well. This one's pretty short, only about 5 or so hours. As I said earlier, Breath of the Wild would be representing Link, considering his Smash design is specific to that version of him. Our time is skyrocketing here with a dummy-thick 50-hour-long average time, but that game rules, so it's super worth it. Back to older games for a bit, Samus, I think, clearly is most well known for Super Metroid, which clocks in at about 8 or so hours. Dark Samus is kind of interesting because she was introduced at the end of Metroid Prime, but didn't really become a tangible character until Metroid Prime 2. So because you need the second game to fully understand the character's source material, but you need to play the first game to get to it, I'm going to count both of them for the purposes of this video. 14 hours for Prime 1, and 17 hours for Prime 2. Yoshi doesn't really have a ton of games to pull from, but I think Yoshi's Island is the go-to here. I'm pretty sure that the crying baby Mario sound is ingrained in the memory of everyone who's ever played it. 8 hours. For Kirby, I'm going to go with Kirby 64 The Crystal Shards. I'm sure you could argue another game over this one, but this one just feels right to me. 5 hours. Much like Donkey Kong, we have another group situation up next. Star Fox as a franchise doesn't have much to work with, but Star Fox 64 definitely seems like the main one that people love. In this case, we're also throwing Falco and Wolf into the mix here too. 3 hours for 3 characters is a nice time save though, right? Okay, so there's like a million Pokemon in Smash, and like they're not really characters so much as creatures, little guys. Mechanically, they're just spell lists. Your experience with Pikachu isn't too different between any given Pokemon game, so I'm going to take all of the Pokemon and split them into 2 separate categories, Gen 1 and not Gen 1. Every Gen 1 Pokemon, being Pikachu, Jigglypuff, Mewtwo, Squirtle, Ivysaur, Charizard, as well as Red himself, can be represented with Pokemon Red, Blue, Fire Red, Leaf Green, or even Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, since they're all different versions of the same game with roughly the same runtime at 28 or so hours. Now, for the other Pokemon I mentioned, the non-Gen 1 guys, I could list each game they all premiered in and add them all together, but that feels redundant and pointless because your fundamental understanding of who or what they are doesn't really change on a game-to-game basis. So we're going to go with the most recent Pokemon game where you can play them all and have that simply count there. In which case, we're going to go with Ultra Sun and Moon to represent all Pichu, Lucario, Greninja, and Incineroar. That being said, let's add 34 hours to that counter. Luigi's most iconic game is Luigi's Mansion. I don't need to do any extra work here to explain that. 7 hours. Ness appeared in literally one game ever, so Earthbound is our only choice. 28 hours is going to be the runtime for this. However, little note here, make sure to bring a guide or look one up online. If you're to play this game without one, you could easily double the time it takes to beat this game, as progression is completely asinine and makes no sense most of the time. If we are being honest with ourselves, Captain Falcon is more represented by Smash Bros. Itself than F-Zero, especially considering his moveset was the first prototype moveset made for the game and attached to the funny F-Zero racing guy litter. But, in the name of integrity, F-Zero GX is going to be your go-to game with a runtime of about 10 hours, but nobody would fault you for just watching a grand total of 15 minutes of story presented in the game's cutscenes to get an understanding of Captain Falcon's character. I hear that really cool and handsome people did that when they got really frustrated with their gameplay on their Twitch stream because those levels are really, really difficult and it's brilliant. Princess Peach just got a new game recently, and I think it's actually the best game to show off the character for who she is. So Princess Peach Showtime is my pick for her with a runtime of about 8 hours or so. That being said, the Paper Mario games are also a great way to understand her character, even if Paper Peach is technically a different character. Daisy doesn't really have a full game of her own. Sure, there's Super Mario Land, but I don't think that shows her character too much. I think you should just end up spending an evening playing things like Mario Kart, Party, tennis, and you're honestly good. Let's just say 6 hours or so. Another facet of the Mario franchise is actually the Mario and Luigi RPGs, and Bowser's Inside Story specifically is a fantastic representation for both those as well as Bowser's character, and I can't recommend it enough. 22 hours. The Ice Climbers are kind of like Captain Falcon in that their home series has gameplay that kind of has nothing to do with them as characters and frankly doesn't really characterize them at all. Much like Mr. Knee of Justice over there, they're more Smash characters than anything else, but they do have a game with a whopping 2-hour runtime. But frankly, it's just an arcade game with no story and scaling difficulty, so really 10 minutes is all you need. Sheik, Ganondorf, and Young Link all use their Ocarina of Time designs, so we're going to go with that for those three. And if you're taking a trip across all of the important locales of these different franchises, you really can't skip Ocarina of Time anyway, given its legendary status. 27 hours. Zelda herself is using her Link to the Past design, and it's probably the most iconic 2D Zelda game, so y'all know the drill, 15 hours. Although, with Echoes of Wisdom coming out last month, you could also probably pick up that one. I don't care, I'm not your dad. Dr. Mario is another Captain Falcon situation where the gameplay has nothing to do with the characters themselves and it's just Mario in a lab coat, but you dedicate the 2 hours it takes to play Dr. Mario and so you can fully comprehend his pills that he throws, I guess? I don't know. Either way, 2 hours. Marth is the mascot of Fire Emblem as a franchise, and I would recommend Shadow Dragon for the DS as it's a remastered version of its original game. But he is also prominent in the latest entry in the franchise, Fire Emblem Engage, so you can play that too if you want. 20 hours. Continuing our Fire Emblem roster, Lucina, Robin, and Chrom are all from Fire Emblem Awakening and will be using the game for all three of them. As I said earlier, I'm sorry Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE/Encore stands, I'm not budging on this. 31 hours. I hope you guys love Fire Emblem because up next we have Roy. Now, Roy is actually an interesting one to talk about. See, he's the main character of his own Fire Emblem game, specifically Fire Emblem The Binding Blade. However, technically speaking, his very first game he ever appeared in was Super Smash Bros. Melee back in the day, as he was included to promote the then still upcoming Binding Blade title. Now, it's no question that Smash Melee has grown to be more iconic of a game than Binding Blade ever was. However, I am going to continue this video in good faith and tell you to play Binding Blade with its 27-hour runtime. Man, I don't know what to do with Mr. Game & Watch. I'm sure you could find all his little games online somewhere, or boot up Kingdom Hearts 3 for the little Game & Watch-esque games in it or something. I don't know, let's just say an hour, maybe? I don't know. We have another double here. Admittedly, I don't know the Kirby franchise very well, so I consulted my best friend Matt about it in regards to what would be the most iconic entries for both Meta Knight and King Dedede, and he said this. So let's do that. Kirby Superstar Ultra for the DS. 5 hours to beat. I know Pit is from the NES initially, and that's technically the source of his design, but Sakurai later made Kid Icarus Uprising himself and used Pit's brawl design and characterization in that, and it represents him better than the first Kid Icarus does. I'm also going to be using Uprising for him as well as Palutena and Dark Pit, because that's the only game they're really from. 12 hours. From my limited understanding, Zero Suit Samus is only playable in Metroid Zero Mission, as every other game gives her power armor, so bada bing bada boom, 5 hours in the bank for that one. Okay, Wario, you're up next. So, honestly, what the Smash devs did with him was incredibly inspired and made his base design be the one he uses in his WarioWare games instead of the classic Mario design. Now, even though the WarioWare titles technically have a story to them, for the most part, they're all just a bunch of goober nonsense. Luckily for us, however, all of them have about a 2-hour runtime for their quote-unquote main story. And you can really just pick any of them that you want at that point. Either way, they're a ton of fun and absolutely unhinged in the best way. Please go play them. Much like my personal favorite franchise, Kingdom Hearts, Metal Gear Solid has a long and sprawling narrative. However, we lucked out for the purposes of this project, as Metal Gear Solid 1 is the most iconic entry for our boy Solid Snake. Yes, I know Metal Gear Solid 3 is the most iconic entry in the franchise, but there are spoilery reasons why I'm not picking that one. 12 hours. Much like Bayonetta and Sora, Ike has two different appearances he can take on in Smash, with both Baby Mode and Buff Mode Ike to represent two different points in his story. He's the main character of two games, with Path of Radiance representing his little baby self and Radiant Dawn representing his buff self. This is pretty easy. We're just gonna go with his Baby Mode game and pick Path of Radiance as the one to play, as it's where his story begins. 33 hours. Joining who I'm sure so many other people thought was his brother Ness, we have Lucas, who only has one game, which is Mother 3. And fun fact, did you know this game is illegal outside of Japan and Nintendo ninjas will get you if you try to play it? 25 hours if you can avoid the ninjas. So, I know Sonic the Hedgehog has a ton of different games, and they're all dubiously on the same timeline, and there's a difference between classic Sonic and modern Sonic, and that I've always prioritized doing a game 1 over a sequel, but come on, I gotta do Sonic Adventure 2 Battle as the game here. It's the Sonic game, you know? Once you listen to Live and Learn one time, it changes your brain chemistry, man. 9 hours. Olimar is obviously going to be Pikmin 1 with an 8-hour runtime. This, however, begs the question, do we include Alf in this little journey? That is an enticing question. Screw it, sure, but I'm going to tally him separately. He's from Pikmin 3 with a 10-hour story. Rob is a literal, real-life children's toy from the 80s, not an actual character in any game except for Smash and Mario Kart on the DS. Worry not, dearest viewer, for I have a workaround for this tiresome dilemma. The first time he or it or whatever ever had a story was the Subspace Emissary story mode in Smash Brawl. So let's just play that, because that's the closest we're going to get. Also, Subspace is peak and an important part of Smash's history. 12 hours. There are many Legend of Zelda games that use the toon art style, but the only one that really matters is Wind Waker. No shot am I picking something like Spirit Tracks or Phantom Hourglass or something. It's Wind Waker, specifically the HD version, at 26 hours. Villager and Isabelle can both be represented with Animal Crossing New Horizons, or whatever the newest Animal Crossing game is when you're watching this. And you don't really have to beat those games, so I don't know, just spend an evening playing them a bit. Let's say 6 hours. Admittedly, I know nothing about Mega Man, but from my understanding, everyone loves Mega Man 2 the most. This is an instance where you could totally blast me if I'm wrong, by the way. Anyway, 3 hours. Wii Fit Trainer is only from Wii Fit, which apparently takes 9 hours to beat, unless you're chunky like me, so ta-da? There are some characters who, despite appearing in multiple games, just have that one game that really represents them. And that's definitely Super Mario Galaxy for Rosalina, and there's no arguing it. 14 hours. When it comes to Little Mac and Punch-Out, I feel like any of them work, but I personally think that Punch-Out Wii gave him the most characterization, especially with his modern design as well. So I'm gonna go with that one, clocking in at a 5-hour runtime. So the Mii fighters are interesting because they're a blank slate that you can dress up as you wish, and there's so many different games to pull from with Mii skins. I'm not going to go anywhere near trying to tally all of those up for today, so we're just going to find a game that uses the Miis in a fun way. And I'm going to use this opportunity to tell you to go spend $8 at a local garage sale, get a Wii U and Nintendo Land, because holy hell guys, that game is so goddamn fun and clever. The asymmetric multiplayer gameplay just hits so goddamn different, and every day I'm so sad that the Wii U flopped because I really would have loved to see more of this concept. And just play Nintendo Land, guys, trust me. Anyway, I don't know, 5 hours? Anyway, who's next? Just spend an hour playing Pac-Man and you'll be fine. Shulk is from one game, and that one game is Xenoblade Chronicles, and Xenoblade Chronicles is like 60 hours long. Plus, it's 8-hour DLC. Sorry, but there's no getting around this one. I'm told the game is peak though, so, you know, there's that. Bowser Jr. and the Koopalings are best represented by New Super Mario Bros. Wii, since it got their modern designs, and they're all in it. So let's add 9 hours to the bank. Duck Hunt takes like an hour tops, so that's easy. For Ryu and Ken, you could honestly just spend an evening playing Street Fighter 2 and call it a day, so let's say 5 hours. Despite getting modern remakes and rebirths and reunions and whatever, I do still think that Cloud and Sephiroth are best still represented by the original Final Fantasy VII with its 36-hour runtime. But you could also play all the modern remakes and stuff if you want to. Corrin is from the Fire Emblem game that they tried to do this Pokemon thing where they had a double release with different stories, but the definitive version of this is like the third DLC, like quote-unquote true path with a 21-hour runtime, so I guess we should just do that. Bayonetta has a lot of games, and her default look in Smash is her Bayonetta 2 appearance, but she has a skin for the first game, which is the opposite of how Snake and Sora do it, and that's where you should start. So let's just say Bayonetta 1 with its 12-hour runtime. Splatoon 1 Inklings are the one in Smash, and Splatoon 1 Story Mode is what we're going to do. 5 hours. I did say before that there are some franchises that I was absolutely not an expert on, and Metroid is definitely one of them. I didn't have a real obvious clear-cut answer to which game would be the best one to represent Ridley, so I did some basic Googling on it, and many Metroid fans really seem to love his representation in Metroid Fusion specifically, so let's pick that one for the purposes of this video. 5 hours. That being said, if you want to blast me in the comments for this one, you have completely every right to. Now, good old Simon Belmont first appeared in Castlevania for the NES, and that's the best place to keep him for the purposes of this video. Castlevania as a franchise has two distinct styles, Classicvania and the more modern Symphony of the Night style, which are both iconic in their own rights. So, for Simon, we will do the first game clocking in at 3 or so hours, and for Richter, we will do Symphony of the Night at 9 hours, which would also include Alucard for the assist trophy as a little bonus here. You know, I've spent a lot of time talking about the different facets of the different franchises so far, and yet I hand-waved the original Super Mario Bros. At the very beginning of this video in favor of Super Mario 64 for Mario. Well now, I think we should use the OG Super Mario Bros. From the NES to best represent Piranha Plant, and even if you don't like it, it's only 2 hours long. Alright, entering the home stretch, we have the single longest game on this list, clocking in at 101 hours with Persona 5 Royal for Joker. Yes, he's appeared in other games like Dancing and Strikers, but Persona 5 Royal is his most iconic entry. Plus, the game is phenomenal, and I can't recommend it enough, so trust me. Once you finish that absolute mountain of a game, you're still staring down the barrel of another really long RPG with Dragon Quest XI's Echoes of an Elusive Age Definitive Edition for the Nintendo Switch family of systems, featuring this ugly fashion disaster of a character. Note, Akira Toriyama made some of the most iconic characters of all time. He was an absolute legend of his medium, and his legacy cannot be understated. Rest in peace, the GOAT, but this design really ain't it, Chief. This game is going to take you about 60 hours to get through. Now, much like how we included Alf earlier, Hero has 3 other alts, all of whom have infinitely better character designs, who all come from different games themselves that we're going to be counting separately, just like, you know, in the little corner we're keeping Alf right now. They come from Dragon Quest 3, 4, and 8, clocking in at 28, 27, and 62 hours respectively. Now, if you still have the strength to move on after that insane RPG gauntlet you just went through, you got a simple little collectathon of Banjo-Kazooie 1 at only 12 hours, representing, you guessed it, Banjo and Kazooie. Terry Bogard is officially labeled as a Fatal Fury character first, so this is what he will be represented by. Now, I know next to nothing about these games, but all of them seem to only have about a 1-hour story or so pick whichever one you want. Byleth is from Fire Emblem 3 Horses. Wait, what? Why does my script say horses? This game has 3 different story paths to choose from, so for the sake of this, I say you only need to pick one of them for this to count. Also, the story route you should pick is the blue one because they're cool, and Edelgard is an actual, irredeemable, fascist conqueror, so her route is for losers. Anyway, 50 hours. Min Min is from ARMS, and ARMS has a 2-hour story mode, so let's go with that. When it comes to Steve Minecraft, you could just play Minecraft for an evening and kill the Ender Dragon and roll credits somewhere in there. So, I don't know, 4 hours. Pyra and Mithra first appear in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and its DLC clocking in at 80 or so hours, so, you know, not too bad.
Kazuya Mishima.
Just play Tekken 8 for a night and call it a day, just like with Ryu and Ken. Maybe do a story mode in there. Either way, let's say 4 hours. Lastly, we have my boyo Sora. For my all-time favorite game series, Kingdom Hearts, much like the other characters' home franchises, Kingdom Hearts has a long, sprawling narrative and so many amazing games to play to fully understand his story. However, Smash keeps it simple and uses his KH1 appearance by default, and that's what we're going to do. So let's do specifically Kingdom Hearts 1 Final Mix as the definitive version. This will close out this crazy long list of games with a final 24-hour runtime. Before I do math and tally all this up, I need to do the YouTube thing really quick and ask that if you enjoy the video, to please like, comment, and subscribe, because the big YouTube robot feeds off of engagement, and this is how we keep it satiated. And also, it greatly helps me get more eyes on this channel, and the more I'm able to feed my video editor the photorealistic crab. Now, we have 2 big questions to answer. First, how long would this all take to do? If we were to add every single game we just covered into one giant runtime, how many hours roughly would this take? Well, assuming my math is correct, that brings us to 1,088 hours as our baseline. This is just doing the main story in each game, and this doesn't include Alf and the 3 better heroes. If we were to include them, you can add another 127 hours, bringing our new total to 1,115 hours. That was our first big question, so what is our second? Now that we know how long this would hypothetically take to do, who would actually go out of their way and play every Smash Fighter's home game, knowing how much time it'll take? Well, me. I've actually been chipping away at this exact project for some time now on my Twitch stream at twitch.tv/Valderrami, and I plan to continue doing this every week, among other games and such, and would love to have you stop by and join. Revisiting old classics I love and being bad at new things for the first time has been a ton of fun. Smash Ultimate is the biggest celebration of video games ever, and actually understanding the context of the things being celebrated is really rewarding. Thank you so much everyone who helped me produce this video, and thank you for watching the video. If you have any suggestions or alterations of some characters, or even other video ideas for us, I would be glad to hear it down in the comments. We also tried a slightly different editing style for this video compared to our first one in an attempt to streamline our process a bit, and we would really love feedback about which style you all prefer. Anyway, that's all for now, my friends. Now if you'll excuse me, the content mines are calling to me, and I can't wait to show you all the next gem we dig up. Have a great one.